Okay, good morning. Continuing with Masechus Eruvin, Tractate Eruvin, page 59, and the name is the fifth chapter. The name of the chapter is Gates of Abrin, and we'll start with 59 B1. Actually, we'll start with 59A1, not B1. So yesterday we learned the Mishnah. David, you here? Yesterday we learned the Mishnah that in order to measure, learned in the Mishnah that to measure the tchum, we have to have an expert surveyor. It needs to be an expert, number one. And now the expert might extend it in certain areas. He might stretch it, makes it bigger. In certain areas, he might make it smaller. And then the Mishnah said, if we accept the measurement of the place which he extended it, if it extended to one and shortened to another, we accept the longer one. And even if we have a testimony from a slave, male slave, female slave, usually not normally accepted witnesses, but in this case we'll accept it because it's rabbinical. And Ne'emonim Leima, they are believed to say, this is the Shabbos Tchum. Up to here was the measurement. For the sages, when they instituted the law of Tchum, they did not enact this matter with provision to be strict, but rather to be lenient. So that's the Mishnah. Now we go to the Gemara, 59A1. Lemokim shiri ba'ein, lemokim shemirit loy. Can it be that he is permitted to the place that he extended the boundary, but to the place that he shortened the boundary, he is not permitted to walk? If we agree, if we accept the surveyor extension, we should also accept the place where he shortens. Eimaf lemokim shirba. So the Gemara says, say that what our Mishnah means is we accept the measurement even in a place where he extended, then obviously the place that he shortened we will accept. It says in number 3, he may walk to the boundary established by the longer measurement, even on the side where the measurement had come up shorter. If it extended to one and shortened to another, we accept the longer one. The Gemara says, Hatu lama le'ainuach. Seemingly it's the same statement you just said before. The Mishnah already mentioned it, that we accept the longer one. Achikoma, this is what the Mishnah is really saying. Riba echad u'miyat echad. If two surveyors measured and one extended the tchum boundary and one shortened it, we accept the measurement of the one who extended the tchum because we assume the shorter measurement was inaccurate. So we accept the extension, but we do not accept the place where he shortened it because we're saying, okay, the shortening, making it shorter, was not accurate. Abaye qualified this ruling. This is true provided that he does not exceed the smaller measurement by more than the techum measure of the city as defined by its diagonal. Okay, so extension is very nice, but not too long, too far. If you make the extension too much, then it's not going to be accepted. Meaning, if it's even longer than the diagonal line of the city, or the diagonal measurement of the city, then it will not be accepted. It says that again the rabbi did not enact the matter and comes to the law of tichum for stringency, rather for leniency. It's a rabbinical enactment. Vatanya, the Gemara says, is it really so that they wanted to be lenient about it? Here is an example. It says no. There are places where the rabbis make enactments and constitute laws, institute laws for stringency, but when they do it for stringency, it's only for when it comes to biblical violations or biblical potential violation. But in this case, it's rabbinical and therefore they're lenient. But the laws of Tichum are rabbinic in origin, and leniencies are therefore permitted as taught by our Mishnah. Going into the next Mishnah. Now the next Mishnah is there's a long introduction to it, but in short, the introduction is trying to tell us that it actually goes back to the beginning of the Gemara when we spoke about a mavoi, alleyway that has yards coming to it. You have courtyards that are coming to this alleyway. It has entrances from different openings. And the concept of shituf mevoyes. Shituf mevoyes is trying to make a mavoi that this alleyway, that everyone should be able to join this mavoi. So let's see the introduction. The following Mishnah digresses from the discussion of tchum measurement, meaning we're going away from the tchum measurement for a little while, which resumes in the Mishnah on 68. We'll get to it later on, and deals with the topic of shitufei mevoyes. What is shitufei mevoyes? The eruv made to permit carrying within a mavoi, making an eruv so I can carry in the mavoi, between the mavoi and its chatzeros, the yards that are leading to the mavoi, and vice versa, between chatzeros themselves that will be able to carry. Now, several mavos can join in a shituf. They can have a few mavos together participating in this partnership, in this shituf, which then permits carrying throughout the mavos and constituent chatzeros, the chatzeros that are joining it. Moreover, an entire town, and this is amazing, an entire town can join in a common shituf, meaning that they're all living under one domain, turning it into a private domain, so to speak, provided that it is properly enclosed and adjusted so that all its streets and alleys have the status of a shusayachid, private domain. Now, a shitufei mevoyes, so basically it's not so simple to turn a public domain into a private domain, but the Gemara will discuss it. Shitufei mevoyes then permits carrying in the entire town, including the streets. However, in certain cases, the sages feared that if the entire town were incorporated into one shituf, you say the entire town is now a shusayachid, permitting unrestricted carrying throughout. Now I'm saying everyone can carry. The townspeople, particularly the children, might come to think that carrying in any public domain is permissible. Say, oh, I can carry in my towns, or maybe other towns I can carry also. Forgetting that it is permitted in this town only because of the shituf. But if they're not aware of the shituf, or they forget about the shituf that was done, this communal partnership, so to speak, they might then come to carry even in Rishus Rabim, which is biblically prohibited. So what did the rabbis do? In these cases, the sages mandated that a section of the town be excluded. And therefore, to remind people that it's not so simple that this turned into a private domain only because of the shituf that was done. So the sages mandated that a section of the town be excluded from the city-wide shituf, So that's not going to be part of the of this shituf, so you wouldn't be able to carry there. So the carrying will be forbidden between the town and the excluded section. So leaving a section out that you can't carry. In this way, people will not forget the prohibition against carrying. They'll know that there's issue with carrying. Now, since the purpose of this enactment, this injunction against including an entire city in one shituf is to safeguard against carrying in Reshus Harabim, it applies only to public towns. What is a public town? Town that has 600,000 people in it. As a public town might be confused with the Reshus Harabim. A private town, however, since it lacks the fundamental feature of a biblical Reshus Harabim, it's under, private town would be under 600,000, may be entirely included in one shituf. So when can I forget? When can I come to think that I can carry Reshus Harabim? When you live in a public town, when you live in a place with 600,000 people, and now the rabbis did shituf, and say, okay, you can carry now. So you might come to think that you can carry in any Reshus Harabim. But if you're living in a private town, meaning that it has less than 600,000 people, maybe I don't have that concern. Maybe if the rabbi is going to do shituf, maybe they don't have to exclude certain areas. Maybe I can carry all over the place. The Mishnah discusses the laws for towns whose status changed from private to public or vice versa. So we're going to see what happens if a private domain suddenly has 600,000 people, or a public domain that suddenly has less than 600,000 people. So the Gemara starts with, what is the case of a private town that became public? For example, the private town of Resh Galusa, which was originally private, but then became public. People would come to the auxiliarch, the Sanhedrin, the head of the academy, or the head of the assembly of the Jewish people at the time, and the town became more than 600,000. It started off less, and now it's 600. Amar Nachman, my timer. So what is the reason that you chose this town as an example? Why specifically Iskarta, the town of the auxiliarch of Resh Galusa? So maybe we chose this example maybe to say that since people frequent the seat of government, they come to the Resh Galusa, there are many people there on the Shabbos, Madkerei Ahadodei, and they remind each other about the laws of Shabbos. So it could be different, including the fact that the entire town is incorporated into one shituf, only because the town was initially private. This should not be a feature unique to Resh Galusa town. So, meaning in every town you can have people reminding one another that there is a shituf, and that's why you can carry. Kul Yisrael Nami, for in all other Jewish towns as well, Betzafu the Shabbatos, people are found together on the Shabbos morning to hear Torah lectures, and they remind each other of the Shabbos laws. Why then is the town of Resh Galusa special? 59a3. The Gemara therefore gives a different example of a private town that became public. Elamar of Nachman Kegon Diskarto de Natzui. For example, the private town of Natzui. Who was Natzui? Is a certain person, which subsequently became a public town. Town grew. So, Tanu Rabban, the Gemara cites a brisa that deals with the prohibition against including an entire public town in one Eruv, meaning turning public town, a town that has 600,000 people, saying Now we're going to make an Eruv, and you'll be able to carry throughout the entire place. Prohibition against including an entire town. A private town became public. And a street, which is a biblical Reshus Harabim, traverses it, meaning that you have for example, let's take Boca Raton and say Boca Raton has, let's say, 100,000 people living in there, 200,000 people, but it doesn't have 600,000 people. But then you have 441 or the Turnpike or the 95 that you can argue that 600,000 people go through these roads every day. So you have Reshus Harabim Oiveres B'Seichel, a street which is a biblical Reshus Harabim. This is a real Reshus Harabim, a public domain that goes through this private town. So it's Ir Shel Yochid, it's a private town, but has the public domain goes through it. Keitzad Ma'avim. So how do we adjust it? How do we make a shituf? How to make an eruv that people can carry? How do we remove the Reshus Harabim status of the street so that an eruv would be effective? So it says, so we learned before that lechi is a post of 10 tfachim, standing. So he makes a lechi on each side, where the street enters the city and where the street leaves the city. Or you can place a koiro, mikan v'koiro mikan. Koiro is the beam that goes that way. Lechi is standing this way. Koiro. So you can either put a koiro or put a lechi. V'noisim b'emtza, and one may carry in the streets in between these lechis or koiros. As well, obviously, is the entire town, which has been incorporated in one eruv. The Gemara says, and we may not merge the town in halves, ela oikula, rather either the entire town in one eruv, or movoi b'fnei atzmai, or each movoi separately. You can't do halfways. You can't do an eruv halfway. Just one movoi has an eruv. Two movois have. Either you make the entire town, and all the movois will be permitted. Either the entire town in one eruv, or each movoi separately. But you can't do half. So you can do one movoi by itself, but you can't do half. Half of the movoi. If the town was public, as we said, 600,000. And it is still public, it remains public, it has only one entrance, we may merge the entire town. We make the entire town as private, one eruv. Since this town so obviously lacks the features of a Reshus Harabim, it is not necessary to exclude a section of the town from the eruv. Okay, so since this town is so obviously lacks the features of a Reshus Harabim, because Reshus Harabim has opening on both sides, this one has only one entrance, and it has only one entrance. So since this town is obviously features of Reshus Harabim, it is not necessary to exclude a section of the town from the eruv. So there is no necessity to exclude. Remember, we said in introduction to this Mishnah that the rabbis were concerned that people would forget the concept of Reshus Harabim, Reshus HaYochid, that they cannot carry unless there is Shituf Mevoyos, unless they make the entire town together. So, but in this case, so they excluded. In this case, there's no need for exclusion because there's only one entrance. The Gemara now analyzes the Brisa that was just cited. The Brisa stated that Reshus Harabim can be adjusted by closing each end with a mir lechi or koiro, and does not require an actual partition or door. You can do either lechi or koiro, but you don't have actual partition. The Gemara will analyze it. We are continuing with 59b1 in the left column. Man Tana de Mi'avo Reshus Rabim. Who is the Tana of this Baisa who taught that a Reshus Rabim can be adjusted in this minimal manner? Who said that you can adjust Reshus Rabim, public domain, turn it into a private domain just by adding this lechi, this post, 10 tfachim or koiro? Amavuna Breid Rabbi Yeshua Rabbi Yehuda. So Ravuna, the son of Rabbi Yeshua, said it's Rabbi Yehuda. It's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya Yos Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda even said more, even a greater chidush. Mi sheyesh lo shnei voti. If someone has two houses, b'shnei tzidei reshus rabim, he has two houses in two corners of public domain. One house is in, let's say, in the east side, and one house is in the west side. The street is thus flanked on either side by the walls of the two houses, and he wishes to carry from one house to the other across the street. What does he do? He may construct a lechi here at the end of one of the houses, v'lechi mikan, and lechi here at the other end of the house, or kora mikan v'kora mikan, or kora here and kora here, v'neisa b'emtza. Actually, over here, I gave the examples that it's on east and west. Maybe it sounds like it's two houses are far from each other. But if you look at the diagram, in number 4, it shows you a house and another house, and house across the street. And so there's a street in between the houses. It could be east-west, it could be north-south, but idea is not that far from one another. It's just one street that is Reshus Rabim that crosses between these two houses. So what is the solution if he wants to carry from one house to the other? So you can see he made two lechis. If you look at the diagram, he made two lechis on the top house. Oisa lechem mikan v'lechem mikan, at the other end of the house, or kor mikan v'kor mikan, or he makes kairo v'neisa b'emtza, and he may then carry in the street that is in between. Amuloi. So the sages said to Rabbi Yehuda, that's not the way to do it. We cannot adjust a Reshus Rabim in this way, using legal rather than actual partitions. You have to use lechi and kairo is legal partitions. But when it comes to Reshus Rabim, public domain, they wanted to have not legal, but rather actual partition. Using legal rather than actual partitions or doors to close off both open ends of the street. So if we have, going back to our case, where we have a private town, less than 600,000, but has a street that is public, 600,000 goes through that street, the solution that Gemara mentioned is put a lechi on one side and lechi on the other side, and you're done. They said that's not enough. The rabbis are not agreeing with Rabbi Yehuda. He says this could be good for two houses and you have a street in between. You want to carry from one house to the other, but to turn a whole street, Reshus Rabim, into a private domain, you need more than the legal post, more than the legal lechi or kairo. You need to have actual partition, tzuras pesach, and so on. Make an opening, make a door, close it. Amar Mar, in the right column, Amar Mar, the master said in the Baita regarding a private town that became public, private town that had less than 600, now it has more than 600. We may not merge the town in halves. Remember, you can't make an eruv halfway. Either you make the whole novoi or the whole town. There's no half the town has an eruv, half doesn't. Amar Rav Papa alone. When did they say that you should not do it halfway? When the partial eruv divides the town along its length. along its length. Aval lerochba, but if the partial Eruv divides the town along its width, we may merge each half of the town in separate Eruv, like you see in the diagram. This is number 8. In this case, each half of the town may join in its own shituf. This because each half of the town can have access to its own entrance to the town via its own half of the thoroughfare without passing through the other half of the town. Therefore, we assign each incorporated group its own entrance to the town and half of the thoroughfare, and neither restricts the other. In an analogous case of Chatzeros and in a Movoi, we would do the same. It is necessary, however, for some type of division, Tzuras HaPesach, to be constructed between the two parts of the town, so that the two halves between which carrying is prohibited not be completely open to each other. Okay. So we learned that the along its length it's a problem, but along its width we may merge each half the town in a separate Eruv. Rav Papa's view is seemingly inconsistent with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. What is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva? So the Gemara says, "Keman deloi ke Rabbi Akiva." Apparently, Rav Papa is not in accordance with Rabbi Akiva. Why? Dik Rabbi Akiva, for if it were in accordance with Rabbi Akiva, Omar, Rabbi Akiva, Omar, Regel amutad b'komo seres, afilu shelo b'komo. He says that a foot that is permitted in its own place restricts even out of its place. What does that mean? Residents of an inner chotzer, people that have living in a chotzer, who have joined in their own Eruv to permit carrying in the chotzer there, nevertheless prohibit carrying in the outer chotzer. They can carry in their chotzer, but not out in the outer chotzer, with which they have not joined. Which so far it's obvious. Now, since they have rights of passage in the outer chotzer, maybe didn't make a shituf, but right of passage they have. It's the same way that, for example, your neighbors can drive through the street that is next to your driveway. They have right of way. They have a right of passage. They're allowed to pass through the street. It's for everyone, even though it's right in front of your driveway. So if somebody made a group that made the shituf in their chotzer, but they didn't make in the outer chotzer, but they have right of passage. Since they have the right of passage in the outer chotzer, in our case, as well according to Rabbi Akiva, joining half the city along its width in its own Eruv should not be permitted. Why did we say that doing it along its width be permitted? According to Rabbi Akiva, it should not be permitted. Why? Since each half has rights of passage through the other half of the main street. People that are not part of the Eruv are allowed to pass legally, not because of Shabbos in general. They're allowed to pass through it. Have the right of passage through the other half of the main street. So the resident of each half in 59b2 should therefore restrict the resident of the other half from carrying there unless all join a common Eruv. Since people can pass through, even though they're not part of the Eruv, they can restrict the others and say, hey, you cannot have a separate Eruv because this is a common area. We can all benefit, we can all join this area. Afilu Teim Rabbi Akiva, you can even say that Rav Papa agrees with Rabbi Akiva. Ad can come Rabbi Akiva also. Rabbi Akiva does not say there that another area's rite of passage invalidates the Eruv. Just because you have rite of passage does not necessarily invalidate the Eruv. When it does, except in the case of two courtyards, one behind the other, because the inner chotzer does not have any other entrance to the Reshus Harabim other than through the outer chotzer. Since the inner resident must pass through the outer chotzer, they restrict the members of the outer chotzer from carrying. So he says there's a difference between rite of passage and I don't have a choice. Meaning, rite of passage means I'm allowed to go through your yard. I'm allowed to go through the streets that is in front of your driveway. But there are certain cases where there's no other way for me to go. I mean, I would have to go through these areas. But here, where the town was divided along its width into two sections, these people, they have a choice. Can exit the town via the half of the streets and this entrance. And the people of the other half of the town can exit the town via their half of the street and the other entrance. So it is not necessary for them to pass through each other's area. In this case, perhaps Rabbi Akiva would agree that we limit the right of passage of each half of the town to their half, so that each half may join in its own Eruv. Some report a different version of Rav Papa's statement regarding the Bais. Rav Papa lo yitem lo kodelo marvin aval leroch bo marvin ela afilu leroch bo nami lo marvin. He says no. If you're doing it halfway, you can't do half, whether it's width or length. You should not do it that way. Do not say that it is only when we divide the town along its length that we may not merge half the town in a separate Eruv. But when we divide the town along its width, we may merge half the town in a separate Eruv. This is not so. Rather, even when we divide the town along its width, we may also not merge half the town in a separate Eruv. So Rav Papa's view is seemingly consistent only with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Keman, Rav Papa's view is in accordance with whom? Ki Rabbi Akiva, apparently only in accordance with Rabbi Akiva, who holds that the right of passage of one chotzer always prohibit the adjoining chotzer from joining an independent Eruv. Here too, the right of passage of the resident of each section of the town through the other half prohibit separate Eruv from being established. But according to the Tanakama, to the rabbis who argue with Rabbi Akiva, we may divide the town along its width in a separate shitufs. So Rabbi Akiva says like this. Summarizing Rabbi Akiva's opinion, he says, the moment that you're making your own Eruv, your own shituf, with a few people, but others have access, they have the right of passage, your Eruv is not good. The rabbis disagree. They said, no, if we're making it widthwise, then it should be okay. We may divide the town along its width in a separate shituf. Now the Gemara said you can even say that Rav Papa agrees with the rabbis who argue with Rabbi Akiva. Also, rabbis, the Tanakama, do not say that another's area's rite of passage does not invalidate an Eruv, except in the case of two chatzeros, one behind the other, the pnimis achdo ledashu mishtanshu, because the inner chatzer can be forced to close its door and use only its own area, forfeiting its right, giving up its right for the duration of the Shabbos to pass through the outer chotzer. But here in the case of a town, in case of a town that has one main street, traversing it, Mi matzu misalki reshus rav meocho? Can they remove the public domain from here? The entire town enjoys equal rights to the main street, which is actually a single, undivided unit. As such, the right of passage of the resident of one half of the town invalidates the eruv of the other half, even according to the Tanna Kama. Amar Ma. The master said in a Baita regarding a private town that became public, Oy kula or movoi bifnei atzmoi. We may either join the entire town in one eruv, or each movoi separately, but no chatzoin, no halfways. Ma ishnade chatzoin de lo yasa adade. What is different about joining the town in halves, which is not permitted, since the residents of the two halves of the town restrict each other from carrying. Movei nami. In the case where each movei joins in a separate eruv, we should also say that osre adade, the residents of the different moveis, should restrict each other from carrying even in their own movei, since all were originally a single unit, and they have not now joined in one common eruv. Why then does the Baisa permits this? The Gemara answers, Achar ma'askinan, here, with what case are we dealing? Kegoin de ovud dako, with a case in which the resident of each movei made a small entrance at the end of the movei. And what do they do by it? By making the small entrance, indicating that they wish to be separated. They wish to be separate from the rest of the town. Thereby, each movei renounces, gives up its right to the rest of the town, and no movei restricts the other from carrying in their own moveis. So again, by doing this small entrance at the end of the moveis, indicating that they wish to be separate from the rest of the town. Thereby each movei renounces its right to the rest of the town, say, I have nothing to do with the rest of the town for Shabbos, and no movei restrict the other from carrying in their own movei. So each one will be able to carry in their own movei. And this is similar to that which Rav Idi bar Avin said in the name of Chizda. What did he say? If the resident of one chotzer in a movei made a small entrance for its chotzer's opening, it does not restrict the other members of the movei from carrying if they joined in a shituf without it. For by building this entrance, the residents of the chotzer indicating indicate that they wish to be considered separate from the rest of the movei, and they renounce their rights to it. So too in the case of the Baisa, all the moveis can be considered separate from the town in this manner. The Gemara now discusses the next part of the Baita, which stated, if the town was public, and it is still publicly owned, and it was only one opening, we may join the entire town in one eruv. Rabbi Zeira Rabbi Zeira joined the entire city of the place of Rabbi Chia, which was a public city, in a single Eruv, v'lo yishovak lashiu, and he did not leave for it a remaining section that should be out of the Eruv. He made the entire place. Remember, we said in the beginning, the introduction to the Mishnah, we said the rabbis decided that out of fear that people would think that there's no such a thing as Eruv, and they would eventually come to Keren Reshus Rabim, they had to exclude a certain area. So, in this case, Rabbi Zera joined the entire city of the place of Rabbi Chia, which was a public city, a place of 600,000. He made one single Eruv, without exclusions. Amar le Abaye, my time Ovad Marachi. Why did you do so? Abaye says to Rabbi Zera, Omar le Sove Dida Omrele. The elders of the town told me, Rabbi Chia Barasi Me'orv Kulo, that Rabbi Chia Barasi joined the entire town in one Eruv without excluding any part of it. V'amina shmamina. And I said that one could learn from this. Ir shel Yochel v'nas Rabbi mi. It is, this city was originally a private town that later, meaning the city of Rabbi Chia, was originally a private town that became a public town, meaning it was less than 600, now it has more than 600. And they told me, the elders told me, those elders told me that in reality it was always a public city. But at the time that Rabbi Chia Barasi joined the entire city in one Eruv, there was a head, the city had a trash heap. There's a pile of trash on one side, completely blocking off one end of the main street and rendering the town one that has but a single entrance. As stated in a Braisa, even a public city that was always a public city can be included in one Eruv when it has only one entrance. And now that the trash heap has been removed, the city is again like the case taught in a Braisa of a public town that has two entrances, one on each end of the main street, and it is prohibited to join the entire city in a single Eruv without excluding a section. Amar lei, Rabbi Zera said to Abaye, Lava daiti, I was not aware of this. So, back then, there was the trash heap, and now that it doesn't exist, you need to exclude a certain area. So he said, I wasn't aware of it. What was the functionality of this trash heap? That it blocked part of the town. But now there's no blockage, so it's Shnei Psachim, there's two entrances, and that makes it also. The Braisa stated that a public town having only one entrance can be entirely incorporated in one shituf. The Gemara now introduces a case and inquires whether the main street is considered as having one or two openings. Bo mini Rav Ami bar Ada Pano Rav Ami bar Ada of Arpano, a place called Arpano, inquired of Rabbah, Sulo mikan ufesach mikan. If a public town's thoroughfare is bound by a ladder, climbing ladder here at one end, which enables people to walk over the wall, and a regular entrance at the other end. So you have one regular normal entrance, and the other entrance is a ladder that people would climb. Now, what is the law? Is the thoroughfare considered to have entrance at both ends? and a section of the town must therefore be left out of the shituf. You have to exclude a certain area because the town has two openings. It's not official opening, the second one, because you have to climb a ladder. But is it considered, can I consider it official opening? Amalei, Achim Rav, this is what Rav said in this case. Sulam Toras Pesach Olav, a ladder which stands astride a wall and allows people to pass over the wall, has the status of an entrance. Even though it's not exactly like an entrance, but it has a status of an entrance just because the ladder is there standing, ready to people to go, ready for people to use it. Amalu Rav Nachman, lo tatzisulei. Do not listen to Rabba. He misunderstood Rav's statement. Ach Yom Rav. This is what Rav Ada said in the name of Rav. Sulam teras pesach olov teras mechitza olov. A ladder that stands astride a wall and allows people to pass over the wall has the status of an entrance, but it also has the status of a wall. That is, the ladder can be construed, you can be interpreting it as, or you can see it as if, as an entrance or as a wall. Not, as not being an entrance in the existing wall, as not being an entrance in the existing wall, whichever status yields a leniency. Now you have to look, what is causing me, what is yielding a leniency? Is looking at it as a wall, looking at the ladder, interpreting the ladder as a wall, leads to leniency, yields leniency, or looking at it as opening yield leniency. So obviously looking at it as a wall, lead leniency, yielding leniency. Why? Because now there's only one opening. It doesn't have two openings. If it has one opening, one shituf can be enough, and I don't have to exclude any. I don't have to exclude anything. I don't have to make tzuras pesach and so on. So we always adopt the lenient opinion when it comes to Eruvin. The Gemara provides applications of this ruling. Teras mechitza al kedam moron. If the ladder has the status of a wall, if we're considering it as a wall, such as we have just said, the ladder does not cancel the status of the town's wall and render this dead end street, a street that is open on both sides. If the ladder has the status of a wall, such as we have just said, the ladder does not cancel the status of the town's wall and render this dead end street a street that is open on both sides. Consequently, this town has only one entrance. If the town has only one entrance and can be entirely incorporated in one shituf. Again, if the town has one entrance, then we can make one shituf. We don't have to do any exclusions. Teras Pesach Olov, it has the status of an entrance. Besulon sheben shtei chatzeros, what happened in the case of a ladder? You have a ladder 4 tefachim wide that stand astride a wall, is leaning on a wall which is between two chatzeros, between two courtyards. It says, if you look at 22, it says two chatzeros can join in a common eruv to permit carrying between them, only when they are accessible to each other. Therefore, adjoining chatzeros are separated by a wall that has no entrance in it. They may not join in a common Eruv to allow object to be passed over the wall. Rav teaches that ladders scaling the wall act as an entrance in the wall, as with any two chatzeros separated by a wall with an entrance in it. The chatzeros have the option of making a separate eruvs or a common one. This differs from two chatzeros that are not separated by an adequate wall, which must join in a common eruv, if at all, since each one is completely open to the other. So what do we have here? Pesach, all of Besur Shemesh Shtei Chatzeros, in a case of a ladder that 4 tefachim wide, that stands stride a wall which is between two chatzeros, Rotzu echad me'arev, Rotzu shnei me'arvim. Since the ladder has the status of an entrance, so there is entrance between the two chatzeros, the residents of two chatzeros now have a choice. If they wish, they can join in a single eruv. If they wish, they can join in two separate eruvs. The resident of each individual chotzer may join in their own eruv. The Gemara asks, did Rav Nachman say this, that a ladder can be considered as an entrance or disregarded at will? That I can choose to say that no, it's not an entrance, it's a wall. If the resident of a chotzer and the resident of a gallery, the resident of a second-story apartment that open onto a gallery, you can see in the diagram, sheshochachu, forgot, velo yirvu, and they did not make an eruv, the resident of the chotzer and the resident of the gallery did not join in a common eruv. Im yesh lifneim dako arbo, Eino says, if there is before them the resident of the gallery at the base of the ladder a small entrance at least 4 tefachim high, Eina oiseres, the gallery by its failure to join the chotzer's eruv does not prohibit the residents of the chotzer from carrying, since the gallery's residents have indicated that they do not wish to be part of the chotzer. V'im la oiseres, and if they did not make a small entrance, the gallery by its failure to join the chotzer's eruv restricts the resident of the chotzer from carrying. Now, if we would have the option of disregarding the access afforded by the ladder, then the gallery could be viewed as completely separated from the chotzer. The gallery's failure to join the chotzer's eruv would not invalidate that eruv, because there is no access, even in the absence of a small entrance. We see that Rav Nachman views the ladder as an entrance, even when viewing it so yields, even when you view it as a entrance, yields to astringency, in that it causes the resident of the gallery to be considered resident of the chotzer, who invalidate the eruv by not joining. This contradicts Rav Nachman's earlier statement that a ladder is viewed as an entrance only when viewing it so as a chotzer, as an entrance, yields to a leniency. So we'll see, God willing, the answer tomorrow to the seeming contradiction in Rav Nachman's position. Bruchim Tiyu, and thank you for listening.